If you drive a pickup truck, this is something you cannot ignore. New environmental and safety regulations rolling into 2026 are about to reshape the truck market, and according to recent reports, 7 popular pickup trucks are now facing potential bans or severe sales restrictions in key regions. These aren't obscure models either. These are trucks people drive every single day. At the top of the list is the Ford F-150, America's best-selling truck for decades. Consumer Reports points to tightening emission standards and fuel efficiency targets that the gas-powered F-150 struggles to meet without major redesigns. Regulators are no longer impressed by raw power alone, and that puts even legendary trucks in the crosshairs. Next up is the Chevrolet Silverado 1500, another household name that's suddenly under serious scrutiny. Reports highlight concerns over long-term emissions compliance and outdated powertrain options that may not survive upcoming 2026 rules, especially in states adopting stricter clean air mandates. The GMC Sierra 1500 is right there with it. While it offers luxury and muscle, Consumer Reports notes that premium styling doesn't cancel out regulatory pressure. High displacement engines and low fleet efficiency scores could make this truck a liability for manufacturers trying to stay compliant. Then there's the Ram 1500 TRX, the performance monster everyone loves to watch, but regulators love to hate. With a supercharged V8 and extreme fuel consumption, Consumer Reports suggests this truck represents everything new regulations are trying to eliminate, making it one of the most at-risk pickups heading toward 2026. The Toyota Tundra also made the list, and this one surprised a lot of people. Even with newer hybrid options, Consumer Reports raises red flags about overall emissions performance and the challenge of meeting future standards across all trims, not just the electrified ones. Nissan's Titan, already on shaky ground, is another truck Consumer Reports believes won't survive the next regulatory wave. Low sales, poor efficiency, and the cost of compliance make it an easy candidate for market exit or outright bans in certain regions. And finally, heavy-duty diesel pickups like the Ram 2500 diesel and Chevrolet Silverado HD diesel are facing mounting pressure. Consumer Reports warns that diesel emissions regulations are tightening faster than many buyers realize, and what's legal today could be restricted or banned for sale tomorrow in several states. This isn't about killing trucks, it's about forcing a reset. Consumer Reports makes it clear that 2026 is shaping up to be a turning point where power, size, and tradition collide head-on with emissions laws, safety mandates, and government policy. And if you think this list stops here, wait until you hear which trucks are quietly being watched next and why manufacturers are already scrambling behind the scenes to stay ahead of what's coming next. What makes this situation even more intense is that these bans aren't expected to happen overnight with flashing headlines and warning labels. Consumer Reports explains that many of these trucks could quietly disappear from dealer lots as manufacturers stop selling them in high regulation states first, creating a domino effect across the country. One year they're available, the next year they're gone, and most buyers won't see it coming. Automakers are already reacting, and the signs are subtle but telling. Ford is pushing the F-150 Lightning harder than ever, not because it's trendy, but because the traditional gas F-150 is becoming harder to justify under future emissions math. Chevrolet is leaning heavily into electric Silverado marketing for the same reason, while quietly reducing attention on higher emission trims that Consumer Reports says are becoming compliance nightmares. The Ram brand is under especially heavy pressure. Consumer Reports points out that trucks like the Ram 1500 TRX were never designed with long-term regulatory survival in mind. These trucks were built for shock value, horsepower bragging rights, and viral clips, not for a future where emissions credits and efficiency averages decide whether a model lives or dies. Even loyal truck buyers are starting to feel uneasy. Consumer Reports highlights growing concerns about resale value, insurance costs, and future registration restrictions. Buying one of these trucks today could mean owning a vehicle that's harder to insure, harder to resell, and potentially restricted from certain cities or states within just a few years. What's really changing the game is how aggressive state-level regulations are becoming. California, New York, and several other states are pushing standards that go far beyond federal requirements. And Consumer Reports warns that once those rules are adopted, manufacturers often choose to pull models entirely entirely rather than redesign them for limited markets. This is why the Toyota Tundra's appearance on the list matters so much. Toyota has a reputation for reliability and forward planning, yet even they are struggling to balance truck buyers' expectations with regulatory reality. Consumer Reports suggest that hybrid systems alone may not be enough unless the entire lineup shifts direction. And while diesel trucks have long been seen as untouchable workhorses, Consumer Reports says that perception is rapidly changing. Emissions testing for diesel engines is becoming stricter, enforcement is increasing, and exemptions are disappearing. Trucks that once dominated job sites could soon be restricted from urban areas or removed from sale entirely. Behind closed doors, manufacturers are reportedly scrambling, delaying refreshes, canceling engine programs, and fast-tracking electric platforms just to stay alive in the pickup market. Consumer Reports makes it clear that 2026 isn't just another model year, it's a survival deadline, and the next trucks under threat might surprise even the most die-hard truck fans as this regulatory wave keeps accelerating forward. And here's where things get even more complicated, because Consumer Reports says this shift isn't only about emissions. Safety regulations are tightening too, and larger, heavier pickups are facing increased scrutiny over pedestrian impact standards and crash compatibility with smaller vehicles. Trucks that were once praised for size and dominance are now being evaluated as potential risks, and that changes everything. Manufacturers are trying to buy time with software updates, mild hybrid add-ons, and limited run compliance trims, but Consumer Reports warns these are short-term fixes at best. Regulators are looking at full life cycle emissions, manufacturing impact, and real-world fuel usage, not just lab numbers, and many of these trucks simply can't keep up without complete redesigns. This is especially bad news for specialty trims and performance packages. Consumer Reports notes that high-output versions of trucks like the Silverado 1500 and GMC Sierra 1500 are the first to be flagged, meaning even if a base model survives, the versions enthusiasts actually want could vanish first. That's how bans start quietly, by cutting off the top trims and working downward. Dealerships are already adapting behind the scenes. Some are limiting inventory on certain engines, others are pushing long-term leases instead of purchases, and Consumer Reports suggest this could be a sign that sellers don't want these trucks sitting on lots when new rules hit. If dealers are nervous, that should tell buyers everything they need to know. What really shocks people is how fast public perception is changing. Consumer Reports highlights that younger buyers are less attached to traditional V8 trucks and more open to electric or hybrid options, giving regulators even more confidence to push aggressive timelines. When demand shifts, bans become easier to justify. The Nissan Titan situation perfectly illustrates this pressure. With low sales and no electrified backup plan, Consumer Reports suggests the Titan could disappear entirely rather than be updated for 2026 compliance. Not banned with a headline, just gone, like it never existed. And this raises a bigger question Consumer Reports wants buyers to think about right now. If these 7 trucks are already on the chopping block, what happens to the rest of the lineup? Mid-sized trucks, off-road editions, and even commercial pickups are now being reevaluated under the same rulebook, and the list of at-risk vehicles may grow faster than anyone expects as manufacturers make tough decisions in the months ahead. This is why Consumer Reports says the smartest move right now is awareness, not panic. The bans being discussed aren't about taking trucks away from current owners, but they absolutely affect future availability, pricing, and long-term ownership costs. What you buy today could be shaped by laws that haven't fully hit yet, and that's a reality many truck buyers aren't prepared for. Another major factor flying under the radar is repair and parts support. Consumer Reports warns that when manufacturers pull models from certain markets, parts availability can slowly dry up. That means higher repair costs, longer wait times, and fewer certified technicians willing to work on these trucks as the industry pivots away from them. Insurance companies are also watching closely. As regulations tighten and resale values become uncertain, Consumer Reports suggests premiums could rise for trucks flagged as high risk or non-compliant in the near future. A truck that looks affordable now might quietly become expensive to keep on the road. What's interesting is how manufacturers are choosing their battles. Instead of trying to save every model, Consumer Reports explains that automakers are focusing on trucks with electrified platforms and flexible architectures. That puts traditional body-on-frame gas-only pickups at a serious disadvantage, especially those without clear upgrade paths. The Ford F-150, Silverado 1500, and Ram 1500 all have electric or hybrid counterparts in development or on sale, but Consumer Reports notes that doesn't guarantee survival survival for their gas-only variants. Companies may decide it's easier to let those versions fade out rather than re-engineer them to meet strict 2026 standards. And for buyers who rely on heavy-duty diesel trucks, the outlook is just as uncertain. Consumer Reports emphasizes that exemptions for work vehicles are shrinking, not expanding. What used to be considered essential is now being redefined, and that puts diesel-powered Ram 2500 and Silverado HD models in an increasingly narrow lane. All of this points to one unavoidable truth Consumer Reports keeps repeating: the pickup truck market is heading for its biggest transformation ever. Trucks aren't disappearing, but the trucks people grew up with are being forced to evolve or exit. And as these 7 models sit under the regulatory microscope, the next phase of this story is already unfolding, with automakers making decisions right now that will reshape what you'll be able to buy, drive, and afford in the very near future. Consumer Reports also emphasizes that regional bans are the real wild card here. A truck might remain legal in one state while being restricted or blocked entirely in another, creating a confusing patchwork market. Buyers could soon find themselves traveling out of state to purchase a truck that can't even be registered back home, and that's a scenario regulators are fully aware of. This uneven rollout is expected to hit high-emission trucks first, and Consumer Reports points again to models like the Ram 1500 TRX and certain V8 Silverado and Sierra trims as prime examples. These trucks may technically still exist on paper, but without access to major markets, their production numbers could shrink to the point where manufacturers quietly pull the plug. Another pressure point is corporate emissions averaging. Consumer Reports explains that automakers don't just evaluate trucks individually. They calculate how each model affects their entire fleet. One inefficient pickup can drag down compliance scores, forcing companies to offset it with multiple electric vehicles. At some point, the math stops working. This is why we're seeing sudden cancellations, delayed refresh cycles, and engine options quietly disappearing from order sheets. Consumer Reports suggests these are early warning signs that certain trucks are already being prepared for exit long before 2026 officially arrives. Truck enthusiasts are understandably frustrated, and Consumer Reports acknowledges that backlash is growing. Many buyers feel these regulations ignore real-world needs like towing, hauling, and rural work. But regulators are moving forward anyway, backed by environmental targets and safety data that leave little room for compromise. Even used truck prices could be affected in unexpected ways. Consumer Reports notes that some banned or restricted models may briefly spike in value due to scarcity, while others could crash as buyers worry about future legality. It's a volatile situation that makes timing more important than ever, and while electric trucks are being positioned as the solution, Consumer Reports warns that infrastructure, charging availability, and towing range still lag behind expectations. That gap creates a tense transition period where old trucks are being phased out faster than new ones are fully ready to replace them. All of this builds toward a moment that's coming fast. As 2026 approaches, Consumer Reports says more announcements, more restrictions, and more surprises are inevitable, and the next update could add even more familiar truck names to the list as the industry inches closer to a breaking point. Consumer Reports also points out that automakers are being unusually quiet right now, and that silence is intentional. Instead of making bold announcements that could hurt sales, companies are letting regulations do the talking while they quietly shift production plans. If a truck stops getting advertised, stops receiving updates, or suddenly has fewer trim options, that's often the first sign something bigger is coming. What really catches attention is how fast development money is being redirected. Consumer Reports notes that billions once earmarked for next-generation V8s and diesel engines are now flowing into electric platforms, battery plants, and software systems. That means legacy engines in trucks like the Ford F-150, Chevy Silverado, and GMC Sierra are living on borrowed time. Even fleet buyers are adjusting their strategies. Large companies that once ordered diesel pickups in bulk are now testing electric and hybrid trucks, not because they want to, but because long-term compliance and operating costs demand it. Consumer Reports suggests this shift could accelerate the decline of heavy-duty diesel pickups faster than most people expect. Another issue gaining traction is city-level enforcement. Consumer Reports warns that some cities may introduce low-emission zones that restrict older or high-output trucks from entering downtown downtown areas. That doesn't sound dramatic until your truck can't legally access certain job sites, warehouses, or delivery zones. The Ram 1500 TRX remains one of the clearest examples of a truck out of sync with the future. Consumer Reports describes it as a symbol of an era that regulators are actively trying to close. Incredible performance, massive fuel consumption, and zero compromise engineering make it thrilling to own, and incredibly difficult to justify under upcoming rules. Meanwhile, the Nissan Titan's fade-out could happen with almost no warning. Consumer Reports believes its lack of electrification and shrinking market presence make it an easy cut when compliance costs rise. One model year refresh skipped, one production shift overseas, and suddenly it's gone. What's unsettling is how normalized this process is becoming. Consumer Reports explains that bands don't always look like bands anymore. They look like unavailable trims, canceled engines, limited allocations, and impossible to find inventory. By the time buyers realize what's happening, the decision has already been made, and the truck they wanted is no longer an option anywhere near them. Consumer Reports stresses that this transition will separate casual buyers from informed ones. People who understand what's coming can still make smart moves, while others may walk into long-term ownership problems without realizing it. The rules aren't secret, but the impact is easy to underestimate until it's too late. One of the biggest misconceptions Consumer Reports addresses is the idea that buying now avoids future issues. Even if a truck is legal today, future registration fees, emissions testing requirements, and usage restrictions could change how that truck fits into daily life. Ownership isn't just about purchase, it's about long-term viability. There's also growing concern around financing. Consumer Reports notes that lenders may become cautious with trucks expected to lose value quickly due to regulatory pressure. Shorter loan terms, higher interest rates, or limited financing options could soon become common for models seen as risky. Manufacturers are also using naming strategies to soften the blow. Consumer Reports highlights how familiar truck names may survive while the vehicles themselves change completely. A future F-150 or Silverado might be electric only, lighter, and radically different from the trucks people associate with those badges today. For traditional truck fans, this creates an emotional disconnect. Consumer Reports acknowledges that these vehicles are more than transportation. They're identity, culture, and livelihood. That's why resistance is loud, but resistance alone isn't slowing regulatory momentum. Another layer to this story is global pressure. Consumer Reports explains that US regulations are aligning more closely with international standards, meaning automakers can't just build one version for America anymore. Global compliance means fewer exceptions and less flexibility for high-emission pickups. As all of this unfolds, the 7 trucks already flagged, Ford F-150, Chevrolet Silverado 1500, GMC Sierra 1500, Ram 1500 TRX, Toyota Tundra, Nissan Titan, and diesel-heavy Ram 2500 and Silverado HD variants serve as warning signs, not final victims. Consumer Reports makes it clear that this list can grow, shrink, or shift as manufacturers respond, but the direction is locked in, and right now, decisions are being made behind factory doors, in regulatory meetings, and in corporate boardrooms that will determine which trucks survive the 2026 cutoff and which ones quietly disappear, leaving buyers to wonder when the last chance really was. Consumer Reports also highlights that the timeline is moving faster than many insiders originally expected. What was once discussed as a 2030 or later issue has been pulled forward, compressing development cycles and forcing rushed decisions. Trucks that were scheduled for gradual updates are now being evaluated under emergency timelines. This acceleration is especially dangerous for models built around older platforms. Consumer Reports explains that platforms not designed for electrification or advanced emissions tech are extremely expensive to rework. For some trucks, it's cheaper to cancel the model than to save it, no matter how popular it is. Buyers in rural areas may feel blindsided by this shift. Consumer Reports notes that regulations are often written with urban environments in mind, but their effects ripple outward. Trucks used for farming, construction, and towing could face the same rules as city commuters, even when alternatives aren't practical yet. Another factor adding pressure is public data transparency. Consumer Reports says emissions and safety scores are now easier than ever for regulators and advocacy groups to analyze. Trucks that underperform are quickly flagged, publicly criticized, and politically targeted, speeding up regulatory action. Even aftermarket modifications are under scrutiny. Consumer Reports warns that lifted suspensions, oversized tires, and engine mods could soon trigger compliance issues in states tightening inspection rules. For some owners, modifications that were once normal could become liabilities. The resale market is already reacting in subtle ways. Consumer Reports reports early signs of hesitation among buyers looking at high-output gas and diesel trucks. Some are rushing to buy before availability shrinks, while others are walking away entirely, worried about long-term consequences. What's ironic is that many of these trucks still score well in traditional measures like reliability and performance. Consumer Reports makes it clear that bans aren't about quality, they're about alignment with future policy. A great truck can still be the wrong truck for 2026. And as the pressure builds, automakers are preparing contingency plans. Consumer Reports suggest some companies may reintroduce downsized engines, limited range electrification, or region-specific versions just to stay present in the market. Others may choose to exit certain segments altogether. All of this leads to a moment where buyers will need to decide not just what truck they want, but what future they're willing to buy into. Because once these rules fully take effect, the pickup landscape won't just look different. It will operate under a completely new set of expectations that are already reshaping choices today. Consumer Reports ultimately frames this moment as a crossroads, not a countdown. The 2026 regulations aren't just filtering out a few bad actors, they're redefining what a pickup truck is allowed to be. Power alone is no longer enough. Size alone is no longer impressive. Everything is now measured against efficiency, safety, and long-term compliance. For buyers, this means the window for certain trucks is narrowing fast. The Ford F-150 with traditional gas engines, the Chevy Silverado 1500 and GMC Sierra 1500 with high-output V8s, the Ram 1500 TRX with its extreme performance focus, the Toyota Tundra struggling to balance size with emissions, the Nissan Titan hanging on without a clear future, and diesel-heavy Ram 2500 and Silverado HD models. All of them represent a generation of trucks built for rules that are disappearing. Consumer Reports makes it clear that manufacturers won't wait until the last minute. Production decisions are made years in advance, and some of these trucks may already be living through their final cycles without buyers realizing it. What looks like business as usual on the showroom floor could be the calm before a major shift. For longtime truck owners, this feels like the end of an era. Consumer Reports doesn't deny that, but it also points out that every major shift in automotive history felt the same way at first. The difference now is speed. Change is no longer gradual, it's abrupt. As 2026 approaches, more updates will surface, more trims will vanish, and more familiar names will quietly change or disappear. Buyers who understand the signals will adapt early. Those who don't may wake up one day to find their favorite truck no longer available anywhere near them. And this is why Consumer Reports says this story isn't over. It's just unfolding. The 7 trucks already under pressure are only the beginning, and the next phase will reveal which manufacturers adapt, which models survive, and which pickups become symbols of a past that regulations no longer allow.